Welcome to lesson 2 of our English lessons for Stella by Starlight on Wednesday, the 6th of January. Today we're going to have a look at the themes within a text. So we're going to think about the characters and relationships that we find within the book. We're going to identify any themes and try and make some links. And we're going to think about our historical links that we looked at in English yesterday. If there is any vocabulary that you're unsure of, please make a note of it as you go through the text and have a look if you can Google the definitions of those particular words. Before you begin today's lesson, can you make sure that you've accessed the reading videos, because they have chapter 1 and chapter 2 on Wednesday the 6th of January. So it's today's lesson for reading. We're going to continue today with reading chapter 3 and chapter 4 of the book and then get into the lesson. Chapter 3, Feeling Uneven. While the men talked in heated whispers in the kitchen, Stella and Dr. Hawkins's son, Anthony, sat outside on the front steps. Jojo, very much against his will, had been sent to sleep in his parents' bed in the upstairs loft. Anthony had come with his father, but the children had been told to make themselves scarce, which pretty much was what Stella was usually told when grown-ups started talking grown-up stuff. Most times, that made no never mind to her. Their talk was usually pretty dull listening. But this time, she was irked. This had to do with all of them. Well, at least Anthony was there. Even though she and Tony were both in the 5th grade and had walked to school together since 1st grade, Stella felt a little self-conscious in the dark with the boy. She touched her hair. She knew it was a mess, and she wasn't quite sure why that bothered her so much. Plus, it was cold. She'd at least thought to grab a blanket off her bed before she left the house, and now she pulled it and the dog closer. You ever been outside at 3 in the morning before? Stella asked Tony, finally, who looked warm in a woolen jacket. Lots of times. I usually go with my father when he has an emergency, he replied. I like the night. Me too, Stella said. She looked up at the sky. Dusky clouds shifted above, shielding, then revealing, then shielding the stars again. Me and Jojo saw the clan tonight. Burning a cross, she added quietly. Yeah, my father told me. He paused, then asked, were you scared? My guts felt frozen, Stella admitted. Tony went silent as the night. The insects and tree frogs, Stella figured, had tucked themselves into some muddy place, just trying to keep warm. No nighttime animals called to one another, at least none that she could hear. Even Dusty was quiet, folded at her feet, but he sniffed the air, watchful and alert. You want to know a secret? Tony asked out of the blue. Sure, Stella said, shrugging, still trying to feel as if sitting outside with a boy at 3 in the morning was a perfectly normal thing to be doing. Sometimes, at night, I go and run at the track of the white school. As Stella gaped, he hurried on. It's honest to goodness cinder, you know. It's so much better than running on our lumpy dirt road. On that white school track, I feel like an eagle or something. Stella didn't doubt it. Tony was one heck of a runner. None of the boys in school, not even those taking high school classes, could beat him in a foot race. Still, the white school track. Stella drew her breath. You're going to get in big trouble if they find out. I'm too fast. Who's going to catch me? Tony said, leaping up and bouncing from step to step. My legs feel the burn of the run before my body even knows I'm moving. In spite of everything, Stella laughed out loud. Tony stopped jumping and got serious. I want to be like the Midnight Express. What's that? A train? Don't you know the Midnight Express? It's Eddie Tolan. He won 2 gold medals in track at the Olympics this summer. World records, girl! In the 100-meter and 200-meter events. They even gave him the title World's Fastest Human. Tony bent his elbows into a running stance. Tolan was the only coloured boy to get golds in track. I had no idea they let coloured people be in the Olympics. I guess so. I read about it in the Carolina Times back in August. Tony began bouncing from step to step again. I'm going to run in the Olympics one day, he declared. But we don't even have a track team at our school. Never mind a place to practice. Yeah, but the white school does. That's why I use their track at night. You think if you went to that school they'd let you run on their team? Stella asked. Tony's step jumping slowed down. Probably not. After a moment, Stella said quietly, You're not the only one with a secret. Yeah? Stella looked back at the door to make sure it was still closed. Sometimes I sneak outside real late at night too. To write. To write? But why? We get enough of that in school. Stella thought about that for a moment. Well, I don't like writing much, and I'm not very good at it, so I practice when nobody is around. He must think I'm really goofy, she thought, but Tony was quiet as she tried to explain. But I do like being outside in the darkness. At least, I did before tonight. Seems like stuff that's hard for me at school is easier at night. Does that make sense? Yeah, I get it. Tony glanced at the door and then lowered his voice. You're going to write about the Klan? Stella's eyes widened. I couldn't. What if? What if what? She hesitated. I know this sounds crazy, but what if somehow one of them finds out about what I saw? And that's not all. What's not all? Stella's heart began to thud. Please don't tell anybody, but I think I know who one of them is. Tony sat back down and blinked. That kind of information can get you hurt, girl. I know. That's why I'm not writing about it, she paused. Besides, I don't think I could put into words the shiver down my back or the tingle in my toes or the thunder in my heartbeat while we watched. You just did, Tony told her matter-of-factly. Stella shook her head. Why do you think they were out there tonight? They haven't done anything like this around here for a long time, Papa says. Tony stared out into the dark. All I know is, every time they get to showing off their pointy bed sheets, something bad happens. I got a feeling they like making us feel uneven. How do you mean? Well, it's sort of like we're living on a boat that might sink. Tony nodded. With no oars and holes in the boat. I think when we get scared, they feel strong, Stella reasoned. But why? What's the point? Tony tilted his head towards the house. What do you think the old folks are talking about? They've got to be worried, Stella said. Real worried. But not one of them ever does anything. She stomped her foot on the rough wooden step. But Stella, what can they do? They got no power, no money. Like my daddy says, it's hard to live like there's a boot on your back every second of your life. He reached down for a handful of pebbles and flung them into the night. A clatter immediately followed. He had a good arm, as well as being fast. Those pebbles had reached the front fence. Yeah, but your daddy got out, Stella ventured. He went to college, and now he's a doctor. Because he was the only Negro doctor for 200 miles, Tony's father delivered babies, gave tonics and cough medicines for head colds, and patched up scratches, cuts and burns. He stayed busy 7 days a week. Yeah, he did. But he told me more than enough stories about how bad he was treated while he was getting his training. They made him empty the bedpans and clean up the blood on the floor after surgery. None of the other interns had to do that. They gave him broken equipment and outdated books, and only let him treat coloured folk. Stella tucked her toes under the edge of the blanket. My papa always tells me we got to be twice as smart to get half as much, she told Tony with a frown. Tony's voice grew tight. And even after all this time, my dad is still not allowed to treat white patients. Like their diseases are high class or something. He whipped more stones across after the first ones, and Dr. Packard, the white doctor, he won't even lay a hand on a black patient, even if they're dying, he added. Oh, he'll lay a hand when he wants to. Stella's voice went harsh. How do you mean? Tony asked, wiping his hands on his pants. When I was 5, Dr. Packard, well, he slapped me. Hard. Right across the face. I can still remember it hurt so badly. He did? But why? Remember that game? Step on a crack, break your mother's back. Yeah, you jump over the cracks on the sidewalk. Well, I was with Mama and we were walking down Main Street heading to Mrs. Cooper's candy store. I was so happy. I was concentrating on the sidewalk, doing my jumps, and I didn't see Dr. Packard. I accidentally stepped on his shoe and got some mud on it. Tony sucked in his breath. You didn't? Yep, I did. I apologized over and over, and so did my mother. She even bent down to wipe off the mud with her handkerchief. But he pushed my mum away. She almost fell. And then he reached down and whomped me as hard as he could. I remember his green eyes as he sneered at me. Then he called me stupid and careless and some other stuff I'm not going to repeat, and he walked away. Tony exhaled hard, angry. Gosh, Stella, so what did you do? I started crying. Worse than that, Mama cried. And then there was nothing that either of us could do except go home. I never did get any candy. Now she grabbed up some pebbles and flung them across the yard. No clatter. But the voices inside were getting louder, so maybe she just didn't hear it. Dusty raised his head and growled softly. Settle down now. Settle down, Stella whispered, stroking the dog's back. Everything's going to be okay, boy. But she wasn't sure about that at all. Chapter 4. Nailing jelly to a tree. The meeting was breaking up as Stella decided she and Tony were about to surely freeze to death. She opened the front door hesitantly to the smell of tobacco and sweat and strong coffee. The neighbour men, a good 20 of them, were saying goodbye, clapping one another on the back, making their way out. Roosters had begun crowing up and down the road, and no adult would be going back to sleep that morning. Stella said bye to Tony and grabbed the broom without being told. Sweeping stray ashes from the hearth, beating at the stones, she was so rough that shards of corn husk broke from the broom's bottom. Her mother took the broom from Stella's hand. You been up half the night, honey girl, she said gently. Go lie down for an hour before school. Stella started to protest, but a firm push from her mother changed her mind. Her pillow was pancake flat, so she gave it a shake, plumped it up, and laid her head down, suddenly exhausted. Scooching her knees up, she gazed at the newspaper-coloured wall next to her bed. Most every plank of pine wood inside the house was covered with newspapers. Newsy decoration, Mama called it. The pages were glued on with wood paste and randomly selected. A wall might sport an ad for medicine next to an article on the price of eggs. As the pages yellowed or peeled, Mama slapped fresh ones up. Stella could not remember when she wasn't surrounded by newsprint. Tonight, she reread a piece about what the paper called a crime wave, 3 robberies, which was next to a story about a college debate team and their success. It seemed like only seconds had passed when she woke with a start as her mother tickled her nose with a feather. Thought you weren't sleepy, Mama teased. You've been down for almost 2 hours. Go get washed. It will be time to leave directly. Stella sat up and her mother pulled her close. It's going to be all right, her mother whispered as she smoothed down Stella's hair. But Stella felt the tension in her mother's arms, and she knew that in reality, fear hugged them both. Golly, the outside sure is cold this morning, Jojo cried as he burst in through the front door. Well, don't bring the cold in here with you, boy, Mama cried out, releasing Stella. Shut that door. Yes'm, Jojo said, slamming it behind him as he hurried to the fireplace. Stella, Mama said, remember to feed the chickens. And see if we got some eggs. Get a move on now. Stella opened her mouth to complain, to ask why Jojo couldn't help, but a dagger glance from her mother shut her up real quick. She gave the pump handle a few quick jerks, hurriedly splashed water on her face, then headed over to the barn, grabbing the feed sack that hung on the fence as she went. In it was some barley, a little sand for grit, breadcrumbs, cornmeal, diced apple peels, and sometimes even bugs or worms. The chickens were always eager for whatever Stella tossed, worms and all. Actually, she thought they were pretty rude. Pushing one another out of the way to grab the best morsels, she found 3 fresh eggs and hightailed it back to the warmth of the house. Waiting for her on the table was hot water cornbread smeared with apple preserves. Stella grinned. Mama made the best apple preserves. Jojo was slurping a bowl of cornmeal mush. Stella could smell onions simmering in the big dented pot on the stove. Supper already in progress. I saved the last of the preserves for you, Jojo announced. Thanks, Stella replied, surprised at his generosity. She munched on the warm, golden fried bread. Nobody made cornbread as good as Mama. Papa sipped from a mug of coffee, reading one of his 3 newspapers. Gotta know what's going on in the world, he always reminded Stella when she'd asked why one paper wasn't enough. The front page of the Carolina Times had a story about a Negro college football coach who led his team to victory, and another about unfair treatment of colored workers in Raleigh. Sometimes that paper ran articles about Negroes who were responsible for new inventions or discoveries. Those always made Stella sit up a little taller. She thought about the masthead of that paper. Its motto was, "The Truth Unbridled." Stella liked that. Truth. On horseback. Without a saddle or a bridle to hold the animal back. Can I see one of the other papers, Papa? She asked, licking her hands free of jelly, glancing at the Rutherford County News and the Forest City Courier. Sure, her father said, pushing them her way without looking up. Lots of politics and people this week. Stella couldn't remember when she'd started liking reading the news, but maybe it was because she lived in such a small speck of a town, and she liked how the newspaper helped her feel like she was part of something bigger. Maybe it was because the words on the walls had always been there. She slid both papers closer, taking in events that had happened all over the country, to white people. Coloured people were rarely mentioned in those 2 newspapers. In a curling, fading copy of the Forest City Courier, glued on the back wall was an article about the local literary club who discussed the Negro in literature at one of their meetings. It read, "This is a topic about which the average individual knows very little." Stella shook her head every time her gaze fell on that one. Now she pushed the papers away. Papa? He murmured, still reading. You think any of the papers will write about the Klan rally last night? She asked. Now he looked up. Oh, Lord, no, child. First of all, it was so late, maybe nobody else even saw it. But even if someone had, the white papers will never admit to it happening, and our paper would likely be forced out of business. He gave the page he was holding a shake and added ominously, or worse. I thought the Negro paper believed in reporting the truth, Stella pressed, frowning. They believe more in staying alive, her mother began, but her father broke in. Never be afraid to be honest and stand up for what is right, Stella, he said pointedly. Just remember to balance your courage with wisdom. What do you mean? She asked. Catching the Klan is kind of like nailing jelly to a tree, he explained. You work real hard, and what do you have to show for it? It just slips down the bark. You understand what I'm saying? Yes, Papa. She understood, but she wasn't sure she believed everything he said. Mama filled Papa's mug back up. It's chilly out there, Jonah, she said, deliberately changing the subject, Stella thought. The children are going to need shoes soon. Papa blew on the coffee. They'll be fine. When I was a kid, I never wore shoes. Made me tough. Sides, I've got lots more on my mind today than barefoot children. Stella saw her mother's eyes narrow, but she switched subjects again. Jojo, Stella, you two get out of here. Ain't none of the other young uns got shoes neither, so don't you worry at all about that. If you run to school, you'll stay warm. Just be sure to sit by the stove on the schoolroom when you get there. Stella looked down at her dirty toenails and rusty-looking feet. Shoes might be nice, but she knew those feet could outrun just about anybody in Bumblebee. Well, anyone but Tony Hawkins. And that was good enough for now. So today in English, what we want to have a little think about is the characters that we've met so far in the story. We've seen Stella, her brother Jojo. We've met both of Stella's parents. There's Tony, Dr. Hawkins, and Dr. Packard. Now what we want you to do is pause for a minute and reflect on the relationships between those characters. Here's a few ideas that can help you. So, for example, the relationship between Jojo and Stella. We know that they're siblings, they're brother and sister. We know that they like to squabble over little things. They're not full-blown arguments, but they have their rows. And that we also know that Stella is protective of her younger brother Jojo. Now, if you think about this relationship between Stella and her father, we can see that it's a really loving relationship and that Stella looks up to him. The relationship between Stella and Tony, for example, they've got a good friendship and they talk openly and honestly with each other. Now think about the main themes in the story. How does this link to the history that we learnt yesterday? Think about racism, equality, segregation, discrimination, injustice. Now choose two of the characters from chapters 1 to 4 and compare their similarities and differences. So, for example, we could put together a Venn diagram like this with Stella on one side and Jojo on the other. And just in the section that relates to Stella, we can write all the things about her. And then on Jojo's side, we can write all the things in his part of that circle. But that middle part there, right in the middle section where both circles overlap, they're the things that they share, the similarities between them. So, for example, we know they have the same parents, so that could go into that middle section. Next, let's create a mind map about the chapters 1 to 4. So in the middle there, we've got Stella by Starlight. That's the title of the book. Off to one side, on the left, you can see settings, and we can think about where some of the book has been set so far. So we know, for example, that some of it's taken place within Stella's house. On the right-hand side, you've got characters. So we could mind map a list of characters around that circle. And underneath, we've got themes. So you might want to think about what kind of things are being discussed so far. So, for example, we know that both Tony and Stella go to a separate school to other white children in the community. So we could talk about the theme of segregation there. So now that we've read the first 4 chapters, can you make an informed prediction on what you think will happen in the next part of the book? Use the prediction stems below to help.